Hello and welcome to the Capital Conversation with me, Michael Hayman. Now, my guest today is Andrea Reynolds, the founder and CEO of Swoop Funding, the company that describes itself as a one-stop money shop for business. That means unleashing the potential of small firms by speeding up loans, grants and equity funding. And she's no stranger to funding herself, as the business has scooped up multi-million-pound fintech funding to help it achieve its mission. Andrea, welcome.
Hi.
Is that why you've been called the money supermarket for small business?
Yes, I would say we are like the money champion for small and medium businesses. We are reducing waste for all businesses, waste of time and waste of money.
Right. I mean, but ultimately this is about getting more finances into small firms.
Absolutely. It's about A, helping businesses to improve their cash flow, and then B, finding them the right finance instantly. So no more form filling, no more searching around. Come to Swoop, give us your data,
Right.
And then we return the results to you.
So how do you get the idea?
It actually comes from my own experience. So I left KPMG about 15 years ago, set up my own corporate finance house, worked with a lot of businesses who needed a lot of capital before being revenue positive, and then realized actually trying to source grants, trying to source loan finance and equity finance was just a huge burden on businesses. Not all businesses could afford corporate finance advisors, and I thought, how can I bring this service to businesses who most need it but can't afford it?
I mean, help us sort of understand where you're aiming this. I mean, there are over
Yes.
5 million
Correct.
firms in the UK.
Yes.
Where does this fit?
Yeah, we feel like we're looking after the micro, small and medium businesses.
Right.
So anywhere between 0 and 30 employees, where perhaps they don't have a full-time FD. They might not even have a full anybody doing anything in terms of their finances over and above being compliant with their taxes. So we're stepping in and saying, actually, we'll act like your virtual CFO. We go and scan the market for all the products that you need.
And when they come to you, I mean, what are they looking to use the funding for?
Sure. Completely different reasons. And the reason Swoop, unlike some other sites, actually looks at every form of funding. So we don't just look at loans, because loans aren't the answer to every single project need. So some need it to grow, some need it to survive, some need it because they're not being paid on time. And so most of the time it's got to do with improving cash flow and then looking to scale and grow.
So do you worry about getting paid back? I mean, how do you assess risk when you're looking at, I think it's 10,000 businesses
Yes.
using the platform?
Yes. Or how do we get paid?
How do you know when you get a win? When you've got a winner in terms of actually assessing that the suitability of the small firm when you're matchmaking them to others?
Sure.
Or is that not your problem?
No, it's not a problem. We actually are useful and relevant to every single business, whether complete startup through to looking for a Series A funding. Why are we relevant? Well, if you're just a startup, we will then match you to a startup loan. We will match you to your R&D tax credit. So there's pretty
so
much
you can navigate the system.
Yes, and the idea about showing full funding in terms of grants and investment as well as loans is saying this reflects the reality of a business's cycle. You don't just need a loan, you don't just need an Innovate UK grant, you need everything across your growth cycle.
I mean, I was reading about this wonderful moment prior to Swoop where you were in Margaret Thatcher's former office speaking to an enterprise advisor to, which PM was it? Was it?
It was
been
Cameron.
so many of late.
It was David Cameron.
David Cameron, right.
And it was Dan Korski was in the room also.
He's been on the show.
Yes, he has, yes.
But you looked at something being wrong with the system.
Yes.
I mean, tell us about the conversation.
Sure. It started from a perspective of I was raising some grant funding for a McLaren Applied Technologies business. And when I started to look at how the grant system worked in the UK, I could not believe how fragmented it was, how siloed it was. And then I started to think, how is government actually identifying where they should be intervening? And how are they identifying whether they're getting a return on that investment? So I was an auditor in my previous life, so I audited the entire grant landscape. I looked up Public Accounts Committee notes. And so what I identified was that across the year, they were putting in 12 billion. 4 was going on administration, 2 was going on grant fraud. And I thought this needs to change. And also 71% of SMEs were not engaging with government on grants, and they didn't know why. And I explained to them, one, it's because they can't find the grants and they don't have the time to be looking. And two,
I'm just thinking, this must have been great R&D for your business, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Well, this is where the business idea started from. It was about how can I make life better for a business owner who is entitled to this funding but just doesn't know how to navigate the landscape.
Now, you're commonly called, Swoop, a fintech.
Correct.
Explain to us what a fintech is.
Yes, I find these acronyms very funny. So fintech is essentially we are providing financial services to a business, and we're using technology to enable that to happen in a more efficient way. That's a fintech, financial services and using technology.
And you're using another good buzzword, which is open banking as the mechanism.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, and you know, very few people know what open banking is, and really all it is you are the owner of your bank data, and if you want to share that data with third-party providers like ourselves, you can log in and say, I want to share my data, and essentially it's a secure way of us receiving your data to analyze it and then match you to savings or the best funding products that are out there.
I mean, a lot of the enthusiasts say that open banking is just going to change the game,
really
change everything.
It is.
So what can we expect in terms of, well, how does that open it up? How does that create better services?
It's going
outcomes?
to completely change banking. So what will happen is today, businesses or consumers perhaps think that they go to their bank for all of their financial services, so for all of their banking products. What will start to happen is that will unbundle, because providers like us will start to identify, actually, you're spending way too much with your bank on your international payments. You need to go to an independent provider like Revolut or TransferWise. Why don't you open your account here in Swoop? So you'll start to unbundle, margins will start to reduce for the banks, and then banks will have to find new ways of earning revenues, essentially.
But the banks are working with you.
Correct,
right? So this is what, happy cooperation,
well,
competition?
Yes. I think when this came about, it came as a mandatory item on the agenda for banks. It was the Competitions and Market Authority essentially saying you need to create these standards and give access in a secure way. So banks have gone from ticking the compliance box into saying, well, strategically, what does this mean for us? Where are we going to sit in the new landscape of the future? Are we going to be just a provider in one of these channels, or are we going to try and own the marketplace and the ecosystem ourselves?
I mean, a lot of the people that I have on the show, when they talk about funding, it's often venture or private equity or, you know, for these kind of, you know, businesses that want to change the world in some way. But then there are millions of businesses that are facing day-to-day financial needs. Tell us about those.
Yes, not every business needs to turn into a unicorn. I really feel that...
Another good buzzword.
Yeah, another buzzword. A billion-dollar business, yes. And not all businesses start life or want to actually go down that route. You have many brilliant businesses across the UK who are employing a lot of people. SMEs employ up to 60% of the private sector employees. So for me, it's about what's out there for you. What do you need as a business?
Do you think businesses see certain signals where funding becomes an important moment? I mean, obviously you can see, I guess, the distress moments. But when you're looking at this from an opportunity perspective, what are the signals?
Yeah, I always say to businesses, and thankfully Swoop can identify this for them now, but you should never look for funding when you need it. You always go for funding when you have cash in the bank. As soon as there is a distress signal at all, or they can predict it within 3 months, it's more difficult, and even if you get it, it's more expensive. So best time to go. So we identify for businesses the optimal moment to actually get some finance in and be able to predict for them when they might need it further on down the road.
I mean, a big issue for a lot of small firms that causes so much angst is getting paid from larger customers. I mean, is that often the reason why people are looking at Swoop as a solution?
Yes, late payment is pretty scandalous, and it's getting worse, obviously, as others are being stretched. And I will include government bodies in terms of paying small businesses as well. So what is happening at the moment is small businesses are just eating into their overdraft, which is one of the most expensive forms of finance you can have, when in actual fact they should be looking at invoice finance facilities. So again, we're trying to improve their knowledge and financially empower them to make better decisions in terms of that.
I mean, government has spoken about late payments, but
Yes.
I mean, you're saying that
there's a lot of talk about it,
yeah.
but it is a long way to go in terms of being improved, unfortunately.
And when you look at the financial landscape in the UK in terms of its ability to finance the needs of growing firms,
Yes.
how good is it, do you think?
Oh, the UK landscape is phenomenal. So we don't have an issue of supply of finance in the UK now, believe it or not. Most businesses you speak to will say access to finance is a real issue for my business and it growing. Actually, supply of finance is fantastic. So the UK has the largest alternative finance market outside of the US. So supply good, awareness and demand and understanding that all these products exist, because where is a business supposed to find the time to do that? That's where the real disconnect has been happening.
And do you see yourself as being that connector? I mean, are you going to be the platform?
Yes.
And so awareness is a big... Is the
Awareness
game
is
changer.
huge, yes, and it's about, so research shows that a business owner spends less than an hour looking for finance, which is why they go to their bank as their first port of call. So what we're saying is don't waste that hour searching around the place, come to us within minutes.
Or
you'll
have half an hour with us, but we're
Exactly.
going to have to go to the break right now. And when
Yep.
we come back, we're going to be taking a look at Brexit and tech and many other issues besides. We'll see you in a moment. Welcome back. My guest today is Swoop founder and CEO Andrea Reynolds. Andrea, now let's get into Brexit.
Yes.
Now, your business was formed after
Correct.
the referendum.
Yes.
You're a child of Brexit, I guess,
Yes.
in terms of the business experience you've had. I mean,
Correct.
Frame this issue for us from your perspective.
Yeah, we were founded in late 2017, so Brexit has always been a reality of our business. I think when you're a tech business in particular, you understand how you can overcome Brexit. It's as simple as that. Whether it's finding resources in European countries, whether it's setting up a satellite office in Dublin, Berlin, wherever it is, we can be as nimble as the large corporates who are also looking at other entry points into Europe. The only issue that really stands for us at the moment is passporting rights.
Okay, so there are technical issues. Are there emotional issues?
Yes, there are. For me personally, looking at businesses that we're helping, I don't think you can be a business and think you're going to get away with not being impacted by Brexit. Everybody's going to be impacted. So for me, I think small and medium businesses have enough to be getting on with and have enough on their plate without having this big question mark hanging over them. So if you're a manufacturer in the Midlands, you might have components coming from all over Europe. You might be exporting. It's just too much of a burden, I think, for small and medium businesses to have to cope with.
Now you have a very unique additional perspective in that your father was Albert Reynolds, the 9th Prime Minister of Ireland, which I think brings a whole other dimension, I guess.
Yes.
What would he have made of where we're at now?
Yes, I think he wouldn't have been surprised by the vote outcome. I think I remember him telling me a story about when he was originally Minister for Finance, John Major was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and when John arrived for his first day in Europe, he said, "How does this work?" And my father said to him, "The only thing you need to know is that the UK is always voted against, so it's you versus the rest of us, and you're considered the bad European."
Historic role, the bad European.
Yeah, so I think the reluctant European partner was always how the UK was viewed. I think he would look at it and think, if we could come together and come up with a solution for Northern Ireland, which is what he and John Major worked on, I think he would be quite optimistic.
But it is the pivotal part of the drama, isn't it? The relationship between the UK, Ireland, Northern Ireland, in terms of, how he might have approached this issue. Do you think this kind of deadlock that we see right now was always going to be the case, or do you think another era of statesmen and statespeople might have addressed it differently?
This deadlock was always coming, and I was really shocked at how little the subject of Northern Ireland was brought up during the referendum. In fact, the only person who really mentioned it was John Major and Tony Blair subsequently. So I think people overlooked that this was a land border to Europe. How could you fix it with an instant? And so, yes, I think unfortunately this is where we're at. I don't think any statesman can get over the fact that you either have a customs union or you don't, and how do you overcome the border issue?
So, interestingly, I guess, from your perspective, I mean, you're growing a business here in London, you've had an Irish upbringing. Give us the perspectives from the two parts of your identity there in terms of how you sort of feel about the whole issue of Brexit.
Yes, I voted Remain. I campaigned for the Remain group. The reason mainly was because I could see what was coming down the track with Northern Ireland. But for me, I think business needs good trade relations. And so I think it is a complete folly that people think on the 31st that we're going to suddenly go over some romantic cliff edge and that'll be the end of Brexit and we won't have to hear about it on the news.
I've never heard the word romantic.
Yes,
well,
brought
with the word cliff edge. But
it's almost let's just take the leap. And to me, this is not going to be dealt with until we have a future trade relationship worked out. So for me, a no-deal Brexit actually prolongs what the future trade relationship looks like.
And of course, we're going to be in November soon enough, where we're facing an unknown, as yet to be revealed set of circumstances in terms of what's next for small firms. I mean, from your perspective as an entrepreneur working with those firms, what do you see as the answer to that question?
So, and again, just coming back to the issue of, say, Europe and the UK, the UK government has not prepared small and medium businesses. The first workshop was held on the 16th of September to help businesses try and assess what Brexit means for them in the UK. For me, it's going to come down to cash flow. If you look at every aspect of Brexit, cash flow is going to be hit. So if there was anything I would like to say to businesses is look at creating contingency plans now, because as soon as the chaos starts, banks will stop lending, other lenders will strengthen their criteria.
And do you get the sense that that's a moment in time while it gets worked out? Or do you see that as a more of a ongoing situation?
No, I see it as a moment in time while it gets worked out. It has to get worked out, whatever the future relationship is. So yes, we could have physical borders, we could have a no-deal Brexit, but I don't see that as the permanent state. It can't be,
And when you look at the long-term future for small firms in that new world, how optimistic do you feel about it for them?
I'm worried. I'm worried for them in the event of a hard Brexit. I'm worried about the impact that's going to have. And if you look at any major recessions that we've had, it's the SME community that gets hit the most. So where do banks go to basically strengthen their balance sheet? They go to the SMEs and recall their loans. So for me, it's vital that we try and protect all SMEs, because essentially they are the engine of the economy. So 99% of businesses are SMEs. So it's not just for my own business I'm thinking about this. This is an overall economic question.
So look after the asset.
Yes.
Right. I mean, just because I'm conscious that we've got time against us on the interview as ever, but I mean, your story is so interesting from the perspective of you had this sort of political background, you worked in a big firm, you went on to work with McLaren and F1, and then you became your own entrepreneur.
Yes.
Give us a sense of what you've learned about yourself on that journey.
Yes, I always knew that I loved the entrepreneurial side of business. My father actually set up a business and was very successful in doing that. And I could see the impact of what growing a business does to a community. So creating jobs, creating a whole village essentially around a business. So for me...
So affecting change.
Yes, and that for me was really exciting. The time in KPMG gave me discipline, gave me an ability to break down complex problems, not to get overwhelmed by it. My time in McLaren and my subsequent addiction to Formula One really gives you insight into strategy, tactics, competitions. So Formula One for me is the essence of business and speed, yes, and continuous innovation, or you go to the back of the grid. So that's what that brought for me. I think when you start your own business, you don't realise it's a different form of stress. You have to have stamina, you have to have persistence, you have to have belief when everything is going against you. And I think what I've learned is I'm very resilient, and I think every entrepreneur is.
But there's real campaigning purpose here, isn't there?
Correct.
In terms of
yes.
a community that you want to serve, you want to build the strength of.
Yes, I didn't start a business or a tech business just for the sake of it. I started it out of frustration. I didn't sit down and say I'm going to be a fintech. I actually sat down and thought, this is a huge issue. I want to help as many SMEs as I can.
So there was a real purpose.
Yes, yes. For me, I think small and medium businesses are completely underserved, yet they are the ones who work hardest to
Did you ever think about
economy.
politics as a way of actually achieving the same end? I mean, I read the House of Cards as your favourite box set.
I love politics. But I sat down and I thought about how long would it take me to impact change if I was to go into Parliament and try and get some legislation through, versus could I not just build a piece of technology to solve the problem? So where I see government failing on distribution of grants, actually engaging with SMEs, I've solved that problem by building technology to accept that they're fragmented, and I bring it together through tech.
Do you think there's something, though, that's a real problem where people actually think, well, actually, if I want to get something done, I'll become an entrepreneur, I'll get outside of the system because it's too slow, too confrontational. I mean, is there a cost to us for that, do you think?
I think yes and no. The no is you're getting the benefits by new technology emerging that helps you solve these issues. I do worry about the quality of politicians in general, because how are we attracting good talent into Parliament? And for me, I actually worry about also how politicians nowadays need to be technologists, and they're not. They need to understand what it is to grow a business.
Yeah,
the new economy, absolutely. And that would concern me about certain incumbents at the moment.
And if you were to just sort of give us a sense of the Swoop mission, sort of bring it back to what, you know, when do you know that you've succeeded, you've done your job?
We've done our job when every single business is able to access the best products, the best deals instantly. That's it.
That's it. And thanks to my guest, Andrea Reynolds, the fintech founder, matching small firms to capital. For many, it's a vital financial lifeline, and for others, it's the key to unlocking the future of growth. And if you want to hear more from entrepreneurs fixing the future, join me next time on The Capital Conversation. I'll see you then.